Welcome to Our Region's Business with your host, Bill Flanagan.
Today on Our Region's Business, a global report on a war for talent and what employers and employees in our region can learn, plus the state of commercial real estate. But first, boosting our region's bandwidth, the Texas company called DataBank has acquired PNC Bank's data center in North Fayette Township. It's second in the market, and it's looking for additional opportunities. Raul Martynek is Chief Executive Officer of DataBank. Welcome to Pittsburgh.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it being here.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know DataBank, what is it you all do?
Sure. DataBank is part of a group of companies that build what we call mobile and internet infrastructure. Okay. If you think about kind of the physical parts that underpin the modern internet, when you touch an app on your phone, it's basically cellular towers, fiber, and data centers. And DataBank focuses on the data center component where all that data gets stored and processed and returned to users.
Now, is that when we hear about the cloud, is that all part of this infrastructure too, or a manifestation
That's correct,
of it?
correct.
Okay.
The physical manifestation of the cloud is those three pieces I mentioned, and ultimately there's hundreds and hundreds of these nondescript buildings all over America and all over the world where all our personal data is stored.
Okay, and so there is a reason to have these regional data centers then, despite this sort of interconnected infrastructure.
Correct, and that's part of the strategy of DataBank. You know, the internet's been around for about 25 years, and in the beginning, these data centers only appeared around the main, what we call peering points in the markets, places like New York and Ashburn, Chicago, Dallas, and Santa Clara, California. As more and more data has been produced and more users have come onto the internet, that data now needs to get closer to end users. So what we believe at DataBank is that's movement towards what we call the edge, which is the second tier of NFL cities. And DataBank is a company that, like those data center companies, started in Dallas, but since then we've expanded to 9 other secondary markets: Kansas City, Minneapolis, Salt Lake, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Baltimore, Atlanta, and our most recent acquisition, which was in Indianapolis.
Okay, and you've got a couple of operations here in our region, in the Pittsburgh area?
Yes, we entered the market in 2017 with an acquisition of a data center in the main interconnection point in the market, and then recently we acquired the data center from PNC Bank in what's called a sale leaseback. What's happening on the enterprise space is these folks have been building data centers themselves for many, many years. And as you can imagine, you know, if you tried to build your own house, you probably wouldn't do a good job at it, right? And now these companies like DataBank have come up that because that's all they specialize in, they can do it cheaper and faster and better. And there's an outsourcing trend, and that's what PNC Bank did.
So even among great big companies, because I mean a great big company like a PNC or any, think of any Fortune 500 blue chip company, they have the capacity to operate their own network. I mean, years ago, as you say, that's what they always did. But there's a real business case nowadays to outsource all of that.
Correct, because if you think about where the value is created, there's no value created in maintaining generators or switch gears or UPSs, you know, the muckety-muck of keeping data stored and up 24/7, where the value is in software, in applications. So this allows them to focus on those areas that create the more value for them and their customers.
So that we're past that point when you want to actually see those servers sitting down the hall in your basement for your particular company?
It's funny you mentioned that. We're still, you know, we're on a 20-year journey here. We tend to believe it's going to be another couple decades before it's all over. And there's a lot of people out there that we call them server huggers. They still want to know where the servers are. They still want to go see them. And we think that will continue in the future too, because there's certain reasons sometimes where someone has to own the hardware to manage their data.
But you find that even here, that people will want to go see the new center that you bought, and they want to make sure that's where their data is being stored?
Absolutely. And the reason for that is because ultimately what they're doing is picking up all their equipment and moving it to a third-party building.
Okay.
So they're going to want to be able to know that that place is hospitable for them when they're doing upgrades, when they're working overnight, when they're installing new equipment, and that it's a good place to work.
Yeah, you're relatively new to DataBank yourself, right?
That's correct. I've been at DataBank for about 2 years, but I've been in the sector for 25 years as an entrepreneur working with private equity groups investing in these types of companies.
So what, you're with private equity and they saw an opportunity in this DataBank company and you wound up running it?
That's correct. I joined a private equity group out of Boca Raton called Digital Bridge. They're one of the leading companies in the sector, have invested in 8 platform companies, over $10 billion of capital, 4 tower companies, 1 fiber company, and 2 data center companies. and I was hired to help identify data center opportunities, and DataBank was the first one.
Gee, you talk about 25 years. You were in the sector before there was a sector. It was pioneering in those days.
That's correct. I mean, again, it's amazing. It was only 2.5 decades ago that we did everything on the landline, and our main form of communication was a fax machine. Yeah. We've come a long way.
I remember modems and the screeching and the dial-ups and all the rest of that. It really wasn't all that long ago that was just the state of the art in computers and networks.
That's correct. And our view is that, you know, ultimately what this is about humanity adopting technology to solve any type of problem, to meet any type of need, and to kind of entertain and care for us. And there's going to be more and more of this infrastructure that's required. It's very analogous to the turn of the century when you had the electricity come up. I'm sure in the beginning there wasn't that much power plants and substations and telephone
I'm fine
phones.
With my gas lights and my gas heats. What do I need?
Still delivered ice
and
that took about, you know, a couple decades to build out. We think we're in that same multi-decade trend.
Huh. What about here in Pittsburgh? So you've got 2 locations here, or do you anticipate additional expansion here in our region?
What we saw in Pittsburgh is what we see in a lot of these kind of secondary cities where there hasn't been an investment by any of the larger companies. In our space, there's about 6 public companies that are in the space, but they're all in those other cities I talked about, the tier 1 cities, as we say. And DataBank is pioneering kind of this type of infrastructure builds in these secondary markets. I mean, our view is that, you know, Pittsburgh, no different than New York or Ashburn, is going to need, you know, dozens of data centers in the future because there's going to be so much data consumed here by the citizens of the tri-state of the area.
It's exciting to think about and look forward to. Raul Martynek from DataBank. Well, welcome to town.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much, Bill.
Sure. Next up, a global perspective on the war for talent and what employers in our region can learn. Please stay with us.